Recently, my husband Greg received a diagnosis that would require an intensive surgery and months of chemotherapy. Like many of you who have faced a similar situation, we immediately began praying for heaven's help and God's power. The Sunday following Greg's surgery, the sacrament was delivered to our hospital room. On this occasion, I was the only one taking the sacrament. 1 piece of bread, 1 cup of water. At church, my mind often focuses on the delivery system of the sacrament, the preparing, the blessing, and the passing. But on that afternoon, I pondered the gift of God's power available to me through the sacred ordinance itself and the covenant promise I was making as I took that piece of bread and that cup of water. This was a time when I needed power from heaven. In the midst of great heartache, exhaustion, and uncertainty, I wondered about this gift that would allow me to draw upon the power from Him that I so desperately needed. Partaking of the sacrament would increase my companionship with the Spirit of the Lord, allowing me to draw upon the gift of God's power, including the ministering of angels and the Savior's enabling strength to overcome. I don't think I had ever realized with this much clarity before that it's not only who officiates in the ordinance that matters. What the ordinance and our covenant promise unlocks also deserves the focus of our attention. Priesthood ordinances and covenant promises allow God to sanctify us and then work wonders in our lives. But how does this happen? First, in order for an ordinance to manifest the power of God in our lives, it must be done with authority from the Son of God. The delivery system is important. The Father entrusted Jesus Christ with the keys and authority to oversee the delivery of His priesthood ordinances. Under His direction, within the order of His priesthood, the sons of God have been ordained to stand in place of the Son of God. Second, we don't just make covenant promises, we must keep them. In many gospel ordinances, we make sacred covenants with God. He promises to bless us as we keep those covenants. Do we realize it is the combination of priesthood ordinances along with the keeping of covenant promises that allows us to draw upon God's power? That afternoon, I wondered if I, a covenant daughter of God, fully understood how to access the gift of God's power through priesthood ordinances, and if I truly recognized how God's power works within me. In 2019, a prophetic invitation was extended to the women of the church, teaching us how to draw the Savior's power into our lives. President Russell M. Nelson invited us to study Doctrine and Covenants 25, a revelation given to Emma Smith in Harmony, Pennsylvania. Accepting that invitation changed my life. Last month, I had an unexpected opportunity to visit Harmony. There, under the maple trees, the priesthood was restored to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. Close to those trees is the front door of Joseph and Emma's home. Across from the fireplace in that home, there is a window. I stood at that window and wondered what Emma might have thought as she looked out across the trees. In July of 1830, Emma was 26 years old. She was so young. She was 3.5 years into her marriage. She had lost a baby boy, her first. His little grave is just down the lane from her home. Standing at that window, it was not hard for me to imagine what might have filled her thoughts. Surely she worried about their finances, about the increasing persecution that threatened their safety, about their future. And yet the work of God was everywhere around her. Did she also wonder about her place in the plan, her purpose in His kingdom, and her potential in the eyes of God? I think she may have. Just across the way, the gift of God's priesthood authority and keys had been restored to the earth. This was a time when Emma actually needed power from heaven. In the midst of great heartache, exhaustion, and uncertainty, I imagine Emma wondered about this gift of God's priesthood that could unlock the power from him that she so desperately needed. But Emma didn't just stand at that window and wonder. While the prophet Joseph was being tutored in keys, offices, ordinances, and how to assist in the service of the priesthood, the Lord himself, through his prophet, gave a revelation to Emma. Not Nauvoo Relief Society President Emma. This revelation was given to 26-year-old Emma in Harmony. Through revelation, Emma would learn about the inward sanctification and covenant connection that would increase the ability of those priesthood ordinances to work in her life. First, the Lord reminded Emma of her place in his plan, including who she was and whose she was, a daughter in his kingdom. She was invited to walk the paths of virtue, a path that included ordinances that would unlock God's power if Emma held on to her covenants. Second, in her season of deep mourning, the Lord gave her purpose. Emma didn't just have a front row seat to the restoration. She was an essential participant in the work taking place. She would be set apart to expound scriptures and to exhort the church. Her time would be given to writing and to learning much. Emma was given a sacred role to help prepare the saints to worship. Their songs unto the Lord would be received as prayers and answered with a blessing upon their heads. Last, the Lord outlined a process of inward sanctification that would prepare Emma for exaltation. Except thou do this, the Lord explained to her, where I am, you cannot come. If we read section 25 carefully, we discover an important progression taking place. Emma would go from being a daughter in the kingdom to elect lady to queen. Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthood ordinances, combined with the keeping of her covenant promises, would increase her companionship with the Spirit and with angels, empowering her to navigate her life with divine guidance. Through his divine power, God would heal her heart, enlarge her capacity, and transform her into the version of herself he knew she could become. And through the ordinances of the Melchizedek priesthood, the power of godliness would be manifest in her life, and the Lord would part the veil so she could receive understanding from him. This is what it looks like for God's power to work within us. When our granddaughter Isabel was given a name and a blessing, her father blessed her with an understanding of the priesthood, that she would continue to grow in and learn about the blessing it would provide in her life, and that her faith in the priesthood would grow as she continued to grow in understanding. It is not often a little girl is blessed to understand the priesthood and to learn how those priesthood ordinances and covenant promises will help her to access God's power. But I remembered Emma and thought to myself, why not? This tiny daughter has the potential to become an elect lady in his kingdom and eventually a queen. Live up to your privileges. Learn how priesthood ordinances and covenant promises will allow God's power to flow into your life with greater efficacy, working in and through you, empowering and equipping you to reach your full potential. Carefully study and ponder the Aaronic and the Melchizedek priesthood ordinances, the covenant promises we make with each, and the power of God we access through those ordinances. Remember, it's not only who officiates in the ordinance that matters. What the ordinance and your covenant promise unlocks also deserves the focus of your attention. Partaking of the bread and water is a weekly reminder of his power working in you to help you overcome. Wearing the garment of the holy priesthood is a daily reminder of the gift of his power working in you to help you become. We all have access to the gift of God's power. Every time we partake of the sacrament, every time we cross the threshold of a temple. This is the highlight of my Sabbath. This is why I cherish my temple recommend. In the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is manifest.